Namaste, Masters. Good morning, good evening, good day, from wherever you're joining to watch this program. Welcome to Mahila Dhyana Mahachakram 2. My dear friends, this is Saroja Gullapalli from Melbourne, Australia. Last year, around this time, I was at Kartal in India hosting Mahila Dhyana Mahachakram 1. I was the master of ceremony for Mahila Dhyana Mahachakram 1, and I had the opportunity to host the 11 days program from Kartal. But thanks to COVID, this year, we are seeing different energies, different times. And with the help of our dear friend Zoom, no matter where we are, we're still able to connect to each other. Though I'm physically not at Kartal, I have this great privilege to connect with all you great masters today on the occasion of this great event, Mahila Dhyana Mahachakram 2, MDMC2. So my dear masters, I wholeheartedly welcome you all to this great event being conducted by Pyramid Spiritual Society's Moment that's founded by our beloved master, Brahmarshi Patri Sir. So today, masters, what I would like to talk to you is about one of the most profound topics that's being referred to and talked to since the beginning of this year: ascension and integration. We've heard so much about this topic in different forums, sometimes partly, sometimes to a great extent. Let's take this topic a little bit further to understand what is it really. Ascension, as the word stands, masters, comes from the word ascend. Ascend means going up. So if you can visualize a staircase, if someone is ascending, that means they're going up the stairs. So just by the meaning of that word, ascension means progression. That means there is some form of progress happening. For most of the masters who are on this path of self-discovery, we are very familiar to another word, which is more or less the same as ascension, which is called evolution. So masters, almost every human being understands evolution. Everything in creation is going through the process of evolution. So if we take our human race, of course, we being part of the creation, we ourselves are being subjected to evolution, which means progression. That means every minute we are progressing. In spite of this progression happening every second or every moment, the majority of the humanity, they are unaware of it. However, a handful of humanity, like you and me, who are on this path of self-discovery, have developed this faculty called awareness. And through awareness, we do understand what is evolution and what this process is about. So the main difference being, it's the difference between sleep and meditation. So masters, when you are sleeping, it is meditation, but it's unconscious meditation. So you're not aware that you are taking cosmic energy in the sleep. Whereas when you take the case when you are doing meditation, it is a conscious sleep. It means that you know that you are taking that cosmic energy and you're totally aware of the process. So the difference between the two is only one thing, masters, which is awareness. But that one word of awareness makes a hell of a difference. Similarly, when the human race is going through the evolution, if 99.9% of the humanity are unaware of the progression, and that 0.01 or 0.1% of humanity are aware of this evolution process, that again makes hell of a difference. Why, masters? Because awareness is the key to all this. Let's refer back to the rule of quantum physics, the rule number 1, which says, wherever your attention goes, energy flows. So, masters, any activity that you do with awareness, we have to be conscious that that's where the energy, the cosmic energy, is flowing. Whenever the cosmic energy flows abundantly, that process happens completely, masters. So, though there is very little difference between the two cases that I have been talking about, there is a whole step difference because of the awareness, masters. With that awareness, the beings on the path of self-discovery understand what the belief system is and how to come out of those belief systems that humanity is struggling with. This group of people that we call spiritual, or the people on the path of self-discovery, they do realize that we are thought forms. That means we are exactly what our thoughts are, or in other words, we manifest our reality. So on this path, my dear masters, people go ahead, breaking the belief system with a lot of self-determination. Many times, we do not have any masters or guru there to help us. But in spite of that, that inner calling that comes, that is plenty or more than enough for that one particular being to keep progressing on this path of evolution with awareness. For people who have read the great book, Jonathan Livingston Seagull, by the great spiritual master Richard Bach, you would well understand what I'm trying to say. A being, Jonathan in this case, with complete self-determination and with inner calling, that was good enough for that Jonathan to move ahead on the path of self-discovery to the point that the understanding of space and time automatically evolved in Jonathan's path. So, masters, though these are stories, the great spiritual masters have come to us time and again to give those profound messages which helps us on the path of evolution or on our journey of ascension, my dear masters. John Payne, another great author, through Omni, that's the channel material, has so many times mentioned that if you want to connect to anything in this creation, the only easiest way is through nothingness. And what is that nothingness, masters? We all know. When we travel inside with the help of our breath, we reach a point which is called shunya, where all thoughts stop and you come to the point which is called nothingness, masters. And that's the eternal moment. And people who have had the taste of this eternal moment and who have known the true meaning of connecting with the inner essence, they realize the true meaning of peace, love, and compassion. And these people who have had the taste of these great concepts of love and compassion and peace, they do not want the joy to be limited with themselves. And the next step that they take is they want to come back to help the humanity so that each one of us also can go back into ourselves and connect to the peace, to the love and compassion. This is not new at all to us, masters. Great masters like Richard Bach, Patri Sir. There's so much channeled information everywhere coming through John Payne, through Omni, Crimson Circle, Lisa Royal Holt. There is so much information, masters. But sometimes when there is too much information, we do not know where to start and where to end with. And hence, these sessions like what we are doing, they really help us to help each other to discuss these concepts, which look quite difficult, or at times they look quite complicated. But masters, when we start talking about it, the simplicity just stares at our face. So today, Let's talk about this topic, ascension and integration. So in the past so many months, if we can recall, right from February, March this year, and for some of us, right from the last few years, humanity, or at least a part of humanity, has been talking about this great shift happening on our planet. And we have also been talking about this shift of humanity from third dimension into the higher dimensions, the fourth dimension, the fifth dimension. Time to time, masters, we have been talking about the concept of oneness. And at the same time, we have also been talking about the concept of fragmentation and separatedness. Two things, extremes of the same wand, oneness on one end, fragmentation on the other end, but they're both being taught at different times during this time of great shift, masters. Let us try to understand this concept a little bit more. As the process of separation begins, now many of you must be wondering, what is this process of separation? It's always good to have an example, masters, when we try to understand something that looks complex or complicated. So this can be likened to a drop of water projected through a prism. We all know what a prism is. When light passes through a prism, such as in the case of a raindrop, a rainbow projects from the drop. The rainbow is a wonderful metaphor for the density spectrum. The density talk that we have been talking, that humanity is in third density, we need to move up. So this is a great example for us to understand what these densities are. When we look at the separation between each color in a rainbow, when it goes through a prism, no sharp division exists between the colors. So masters, when these colors are seen as the output of the prism, there is really no sharp boundaries between them. Colors gradually transition from one to another. This is exactly true for the shift between the so-called densities, master, the third to the fourth density, the fourth to the fifth, and the shift between all the densities. The oneness consciousness, which we all talk about all the time, belongs to all the densities, masters. So, though we are saying oneness on one hand, and then we are saying the separatedness through density, what I would like to bring forth is, though the densities sound separated, but that example of prism that I gave you, there is no clear distinction between the colors that you see as an output from the prism. Similarly, all the densities that we are talking about, the ascension of this planet, the humanity, from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5. Among all these densities, the oneness consciousness exists, masters. But consciousness expresses itself differently in each density, moving from intense separation to supreme integration, masters. For instance, water can be gaseous, it can be liquid, or it can be frozen, but it is still water. Consciousness is the same. It can change expressions, masters, but it is still consciousness. The first density, we've been talking about all this density, so let's talk a little bit further about it. The first density represents the consciousness of all the physical stuff of the universe. For example, the periodic table of elements that we talk about, the elements that comprise the building block of the physical universe, this is the first density consciousness. This is not inert substance, masters, but this is a specific form of consciousness. The whole mineral kingdom is included here. As planets form, the elements create a collective consciousness that becomes the consciousness of the planet itself. Consciousness at this level is not singular like human beings, masters. The spectrum now moves to the second density. So if we have seen the first density, now let's talk about the second density. This contains the consciousness of plants and animals, masters. If you really looked closely at second density, there is a spectrum within the spectrum. Very early second density is more neutral consciousness with no ego structures, masters. This is a very important point, with no ego structure. However, as we move through second density and towards third density on the spectrum, simple ego structures, they begin to form. Example, dogs, chimpanzees, they show rudimentary beginning of ego structures. If you can really cast your thought, or if you can recall the behaviors of dog and chimpanzees, you can start to see that there is beginning of ego structure, masters. Now, as we move from the second density to the third density now, life forms begin to have egoic structures. Humans have expressed their consciousness from a third density frequency for a very, very long time, masters. Remember that egoic structure is not negative. The ego simply acts as an anchor to keep us in that separated reality, to have the experience of separation. Third density is the most separated density of the spectrum, masters. As we move towards the high end of this third density, as I said, within each density is a spectrum. So as we move towards the higher end of third density, the egoic structures, they start disintegrating. But this often causes fear and panic amongst us, masters. We feel as if we can't control reality. What really happens is that the ego structure, the egoic structure, shifts into a more natural state of existence that has very little to do with controlling anything. As a species, we begin a very important relearning process that helps us to let go and experience reality in a totally new way. As we continue to evolve through fourth density, ego structures, they tend to get weaker, masters. And the moment towards balance gets stronger. What do we mean by balance? Mostly, it has to do with the balance between the heart and the mind, between our masculine energy and our feminine energy. That reflects the universal archetypes. As I mentioned, the heart reflects the male archetype energy, the female archetype energies, whereas the mind, it represents the male energies, masters. As we all know, every human being has got the male and the female energy. And that's the main game of balance, masters. This Mahila Dhyana Mahachakram is basically to make us aware that for eons we have tried to express ourselves through the male energy, through the mind. The time has come, masters, to slowly turn our path from mind to heart, from our male energy to female energy, so that we can have the great balance between the heart and the mind. Now, masters, the ego structures that I have been talking about in the discussion so far, these ego structures, they serve as anchors to keep us in our bodies. So that is why I say that ego is not a bad concept. You need it to keep yourself in your bodies. But the problem is our egos do not weigh us down or delude us as egos do in third density. So in the third density is the density where egos get too complicated and we totally forget the purpose of the ego, masters. That is the biggest difference between the third and the fourth density consciousness. As we move towards the fifth density, the ego structure further disintegrates. It's breaking down, masters. So remember, the ego is there, but it's breaking down. Even at the very high levels of fourth density, the physical body is not the same. It has the capacity. It's not the same because it has the capacity to hold much more light. And eventually it transitions from a dense physical structure like how we see ourselves to a lighter physical structure, masters. As we move into the lower levels of fifth density, so now we are moving on from third to fourth, and now we are trying to understand the next upper density, the fifth density. So as we move into the lower levels of fifth density, the ego begins to move away from individual identity to group identity, masters. This is what we call group consciousness, which is the characteristic of fifth density expression, fifth density dimension. As we move into the fifth density, the consciousness takes archetypal form, which is much more universal. That means you're not identified by so and so person, but you're identified with energies, masters. That is what is archetypal form means. The physical bodies, as we know, they no longer exist, masters. As we move on the spectrum from higher fifth density to further sixth density, the idea of singular identity like you, me, Saroja, Pradeep, Patrisar, these are singular identities. They diminish even more, masters. There is no anchor at this point. What was your anchor? If you remember, I said ego is our anchor to keep us in this physical body. But at this sixth density, there is no necessity. So you do not need an anchor because there is no physical body any longer. So moving into sixth density is where you start to find the idea, the feeling of group consciousness. For example, we have often talked about sixth density as expressing Christ consciousness, Buddha consciousness. So here, it's a collective of awakened energy that can still reach back through the densities and help those experiencing separation in the third density. Masters, it's very important to understand the consciousness in sixth density can always travel back to help people who are experiencing the separatedness in the third density. And as if we go back again from where we started, so from third density, as we go into the fourth density, we have the choice to act from love or fear. So masters, if you still have the doubt of which density we are, majority of the humanity for long time have been on the third density, as I had mentioned earlier. And this whole process of ascension is moving further up from third to fourth, fourth to fifth, and so on. So we have the choice to act from love or fear. Depending on what we choose, there is a certain result. And along with the result comes the dual reality, masters, the duality that we always talk about. Every choice we make has a consequence. So every choice we make actually creates a new reality line. This confuses human beings, us, because the ego thinks it has to manage and understand this process. Let's go back to an example, masters. Let's go back to an example of you or me who wants to eat, Mexican food for lunch, for example. That you who wants to eat Mexican food is very real. But that you has its own ego, masters, because it needs an anchor to separate itself from in this physical reality. So with that ego will always ask you that you are special and you are unique. So you separate yourself in your physical reality from everything else. Just like we always do, masters, we say me, mine, I. You do not share egos, meaning your ego in this reality is not the same ego present in that person who is having Mexican food. That is the nature of the ego. It never wants the same. So when it thinks about parallel realities, so what does parallel reality mean? That you can have different potential realities at any point of time, and that is what is parallel reality. So masters, if any of you have read the book Immortal, I'm going to put down the concepts of different things that we have learned along. We through Swadhyaya Yoga have learned so much, masters. We can apply all that when we are trying to understand this concept of ascension and integration. So in that book of Immortal, we have so well understood what are parallel realities. So ego cannot understand parallel realities. Ego will never accept that there is a potential that you can be at two places and you can choose which one of that reality. So when the ego thinks about parallel realities, it habitually feels like it has to control or it has to understand all the parallel realities, which that is the nature of ego, masters, to control. There can never be a right or wrong split, because in the non-duality realm of oneness, everything is equal, masters. Nothing is ever experienced accidentally. The idea of there being a right or a wrong choice is an example, is an exact example of what we are just talking about. The ego believes that it has to understand everything, categorize everything, label everything, and judge all the realities. In your true essence of the oneness, there is no right, there is no wrong, masters. Nothing is left undone, and nothing is extraneous or a mistake. As the ego begins to understand this, it learns to let go control. It struggles, masters, in the initial phase. Ego struggles, but slowly, through awareness, through self-introspection, it can slowly tame this ego so that it can understand, and it learns to let go of control. And when it lets go of control, it learns that all it can do is walk the path here and now. The ego very well understands that everything is happening in here and now, right in this moment. Make choice in the moment and follow the flow of energy that unfolds from that choice that you make in this moment, masters. So experiencing linear time in a physical reality dominated by our polarized ego, which is our duality ego, is a mechanism that allows you to experience separation in a way. Separation from what? Separation from that oneness in a way that you can really fully experience being separated from the oneness. And this is what the oneness wanted, masters, the experience. And that's what we are here for. But this state of experience is only an illusion, master. It's like a hologram, which is just a photographic image. So if we can understand that this is an illusion, then it is very easy for us to understand that we are stuck in this third density drama because we are being led by this ego. So I'll give you a few examples of when the transition comes for us to move from third to fourth density, the things that we see happening within ourselves. So masters, suppose you're looking for an object, you know, I'm just telling you the comparison between how it feels like from third density to fourth density. So suppose you're looking for an object like a water bottle, or, doesn't matter if it's a living being, your puppy, your dog. So the first part of the exercise, suppose you've got a water bottle, you want to look for it. What will you start doing? You start mentally focusing. So you use the energy of the solar plexus. That means your willpower. And your willpower will navigate. Your mind will say, yes, I want to find the bottle, right? The second part, masters, which is the fourth density behavior, you will not use the mind to look for the bottle. This part of the exercise will be heart focused, master. You will start navigating through the heart to reach the destination. If it's a water bottle or your puppy you want to find, you will not use mind. Okay, where did I last see my puppy? Next to the laundry. So, okay, it should be close to the laundry. That is mind focus, masters. This is how ego tries to take control through mind in the third density. But in fourth density, masters, you give your mind, your ego, a little bit of rest, and you follow your heart, which is your archetypal female energy. And that will navigate to your destination. And this type of reality navigation is how your state of being changes in fourth density, masters. So as I said, it doesn't matter whether it's a water bottle or the example can be anything, you will develop the ability to connect to a destination in a whole new way, masters, and without the ego as the driving force. So you might be wondering, have you ever heard of space travel, masters? The same principle is true for the space travel. When great masters travel through time and space, they choose points to have a strong connection to, masters. People, again, I'm going to quote examples of books that you are familiar with. If you have read Jonathan Seagull, what happens to Jonathan when he crosses the earth realm and goes to those light being realm, where he's got Chang, who is his master or guru, teaches Jonathan how to build the image of the other side of the shore. And he says, you can be on the other side just in this instant. But for that, you need to have clarity, you need to have focus, you need to be able to connect to the scenery of the other side where you want to be present. And masters, that forming scene of where you want to go, the destination is called imagery. People, again, I'm going to quote books, masters, people who have read Anastasia. You know, in that book of Anastasia, so detailed, they have talked about what imagery is. So in that book, it clearly says people of the Vedras times, that's what they call themselves, Vedras times. This is millenniums ago, where people lived through their heart, people who lived through their awareness. Um, those time people are called Vedras people, masters. And this is how they did. To travel, they used imagery. And today we are doubting ourselves, masters. We think we cannot transcend space and time. We feel ourselves limited by this physical limitations. So in that example that I was talking about, that is reaching to a water bottle, see how the understanding and your physical reality changes when you move from third to fourth density. And there is so much emotional game that is happening all the time, masters. Every intention that we place is an emotional energy. Emotional energy is nothing but karma, masters. We care all this while we had our understanding of karma as a tooth for a tooth, an eye for an eye. But the time has come, masters, as part of this ascension. We all need to understand that we need to refine our understanding of karma. Karma is nothing but emotional energy. In the end, it often comes down to self-forgiveness and releasing that guilt and blame energy if you want to be released out of this emotional energy of karma, masters. Until you address the emotional pattern that has caused the intention to create harm, the cycle repeats. So it's just not enough that you think, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore, but that thought comes again. You might not have done it in reality, but understand, masters, intention is energy. Intention is an emotional energy, and that's good enough to trigger your karma cycle. So most important thing is, if we want to get out of this karma cycle in the chain of this third density, we need to address the emotional pattern that caused the intention to start this whole karma cycle. That is why working with the emotional body is so important right now, masters. So to transcend your third density experience and move into fourth density as a species, masters, you need to address the emotional energy that has been locked within you for so long as you have been stuck in this third density for. So now from a fourth density perspectiveness, if we try to understand from that perspective, consciousness begins to know itself and starts acting from a place of integrity. So integrity arises when thoughts, when emotions and actions, they're all in alignment. Something very hard to understand when you are in an ego-dominated reality. In fourth density reality, you don't need external ethics or rules. You don't need anyone to tell you that this is right, you should be doing this, you should be abiding by the law. Those kind of external ethics and rules and laws are required for third density. But as the human race, progresses from third density to fourth density, you don't need those external ethics or rules, because your actions are guided by internal alignment. And internal alignment for what, of what I just mentioned, your thoughts, your emotions, your actions, rather than what the ego desires. So when actions come from an internal alignment towards that wholeness, being ethical, and how that plays out in reality, this becomes a very natural process for us masters. And that is what creates harmony in the society. That is what the ultimate results we see in the fourth density. So letting go of the patterns that we have carried for so long, that stop us from living as our true state of love. Very important, master, what I'm saying. We have to let go of the pattern. What kind of patterns? That have really stopped us from living from our true state of love. It is most important now, and that's the first step in our healing and transformation process, masters. So that topic, when I was mentioning integration, that is nothing but the healing and the transformation process that we go through in this journey of ascension, masters. So as a physical being, whether we have mental or emotional, physical or spiritual pain, it's inevitable, because that's the part of the learning, you know. So we are very polarized, everything has got the two extreme. So anyone in a physical body, they feel pain. But when you feel pain from a neutral place, that is from non-dual place, then it is merely a sensation that you can release. If you don't want, you can say, I release it, or you just integrate and say, yes, I've got the experience, that's enough. And if you do not deny, most of the time what we are denying, masters, what we are doing, masters, either we are denying pain, we don't want that experience, or we get too much attached to that experience. So if we stop doing either of those, then the pain just moves through us very simply. So suffering has to do with attachments, masters, that we have to the pain. And those pains are, like hatred of pain. We avoid things, we reject things. So we are trying to resist the experience that are coming to us in the physical reality. And when we reject those experiences that are coming to us, masters, that's what gives us the pain. So when we start accepting the reality, it just starts flowing through us, masters. And when you master pain, you experience an indescribable level of freedom that creates a momentum that accelerates your awakening, masters. So that ascension process comes with awakening. So what accelerates your awakening is how you accept the experiences that come into your life. So aspect of embracing physicality is a path to awakening, masters. Do not reject your reality because you think, oh my God, I've been in this physical reality for too long. I want to be a light being. You were a light being, masters. You consciously have come into this physical realm. So aspect of embracing physicality is a path to awakening. The oneness, the one consciousness wanted to experience separations, masters. But now that we are separated, the separated forms that we are, all these parts are screaming, saying, no, I don't want to be here. This is what we are all doing. We are rejecting our reality. The prime directive of that one consciousness is to experience this separation. But as a separated being, we are resisting, masters. We develop coping mechanism, ways to deny emotions. We don't want emotions. Oh, that's painful. This is harmful. So we are denying emotions. We avoid physical pain. The mind pulls us into a constant loop of dialogue. Whatever we are going through, masters, we don't just experience that experience. There's a constant dialogue going in our mind. And that is what is creating suffering in us, masters. We don't really fully embody ourselves until the fourth density. So all this painful process is when we are in third density. But that painful process is only painful because we are rejecting this part of our third density reality, masters. So we have to go deep into the experience of separation if we want to be free of it. That is the only way to come out of this experience, masters. So we are all moving into a cycle of integration, masters. We are not as separated, and there is less polarization as we're moving forward. So as we move into the fourth density, we embody ourselves more. That means we accept ourselves more. In third density, we come into a realm of separation, which is very intense, chaotic, and the ego is always resisting it. We push away pain, and what we are doing, we are chasing pleasures, masters. But as we move into the fourth density, one of the characteristics of this integration is that we stop resisting things like pain, sorrow, sadness. So we stop resisting things we don't like in third density, but in fourth density we don't resist them any longer. We stop trying to control. Instead, we embrace the entire experience of physicality, and that's what we mean by embodying ourselves more. So embodying means, masters, we're embracing the experience of physicality. With that, we become more present. We realize that this is a paradox. What is a paradox? Two opposite realities at the same time. So when we become fully present in the fourth density, it means we have surrendered to our experience of physicality. And that is, masters, when it's time to go home. That is what we're all trying to do, isn't it, masters? We're all craving to go home. And unless we accept our realities, masters, the way to home is not going to be clear for us. Now, masters, this particular path to going home is only becomes difficult, masters, when we are on the third density path. But as we start moving to the fourth density, masters, this does not, this becomes much more easier for us to understand. So collectively, we are moving into a confusing period because of this emotional game that is going on, masters. So we are moving into this confusing period of deep emotional release, which is a very necessary part of a species awakening process, masters. When your heart frequency shifts, the blockages in your emotional body, they begin to melt like, wax, masters, the candle wax. We are physical beings who still have the anchor of ego, and the mind demands understanding. The mind wants to grab it and look at it through a microscope. When we obsessively, we have this obsession. So when we obsessively examine something, masters, you are missing the experience. So for example, you are standing there looking at a sunrise, and now you start, if you just stand there looking at the sunrise, masters, it's beautiful. There's no words. Your heart can feel it, but words can't describe, masters. If you try to start now describing it, you'll have to analyze it. You have to use your logical mind. That means now you have starting using the microscope, and the beauty goes away, masters. So when you obsessively start examining things, you miss the experience. That is why what it is it is important that we have to balance our experience with all this understanding. When we are confused about a concept, and when our mind tries to grasp and dissect it, dissect means cut it into different cross section, instead of just being there and experiencing it, this is the problem that arises, masters. So if you cannot understand a concept, stop going through the logical mind and dissecting it. Just be there, masters. Doesn't matter what experience it is. I've given you an example of sunrise, but that's not it, masters. Everything in our life, whether it's pain or pleasure or the so-called challenges, if you cannot make a sense out of it, then just be there. Just experience it. And in that experience, true understanding comes, masters. Be fully present with the experience. And through your experience, in that experience, surely the understanding will flow through you, because experiences create understanding, masters. One thing we all need to understand is when we hear about this word awakening, we think we have to do something. No, masters. the process of awakening, going towards, healing process or integration process, this whole process of awakening is not to do something. It's actually a process of not doing anything. The ego fears the state of not doing because it sees its function coming to a close. So when you're not doing anything, ego is getting worried because it knows that if you don't do anything for a long time, you will start enjoying it and then the ego will cease. So this is the challenge that we have, masters. The ego is always pushing us into a doing state, but the awakening process will only happen in the non-doing phase, masters. The oneness consciousness is always at rest, masters. It is calm. There is no conflict there when you are in oneness because there is no duality and it exists in a completely balanced state. But duality is a basic truth of existence once you enter a physical reality. So to understand this duality, if I can give you an example, masters, we all know the symbol of infinity. You know how the infinity symbol is. The point where the symbol crosses or the two loops meet, master, that together, that is the point of oneness. If you can, I'm just giving you an example so that you can understand what is the state of calmness when you are in oneness and what is the state of the duality when you go in that physical reality. And the best example is that symbol of infinity, where you have a loop and then another loop, and both the loops join at that point. So that is the point of oneness, masters. And existence in physical reality brings you in a state where energy flows through the cycle of duality. So that cycle of duality are the two loops on the either side of that infinite sign, masters. And when you're going from your physical energy, your male energy to female energy, you always cross that point of oneness, which is the balance, masters. And this archetypal male energy, female energy, which is also called yin and yang, can be so nicely understood with that symbol of infinity. And every time, what we require is that balancing point between the two energies, masters. So the relationship is between that one point and the separated realities, which are the two loops. So when we are born as human, it appears that we have moved into a reality of separation, but we have never left oneness, masters. It is an illusion that has been created for this experience. There is nowhere to go separate from the oneness. The oneness contains it all, including every realm of separation, including us. We're still in that ocean or the lake of oneness, masters. We are now in the beginning phases of crossing the threshold into the fourth densities, masters. For a long time, I mean, in the last few years, this process has been going where, humanity's effort or where the shift is happening from third density to fourth density, intense separation can no longer be completely maintained, masters. All these days, it was okay. The war, the non-understanding, the conflict was okay in the middle of this third density. But now this intense separation can no longer be completely maintained, masters, because energy is moving towards integration. And that means you eventually become less ego driven. So you stop using much your mind, more heart driven, coming to the balance point between yin and yang, between the male energy and the female energy. It also means you once again become aware of the truth of non-linear spirituality. So masters, linear spirituality is the linear phase that we are in. Everything is linear, including time and space. But then you start understanding the truth of non-linear spirituality once you start working from less ego-driven reality. What you experience in this life affects the collective, masters. Everything you experience, it gets absorbed back into that lake of oneness, if lake makes sense, or the ocean of oneness. So from that oneness, we all emerge as separate consciousness in grand harmony, doing all this drama of densities, masters, where all individual beings, we carry the complete picture of oneness. Each one of us are complete essence of that oneness, but we play only a part of it, because that's the drama we have come here. Though we have the complete essence of oneness, but each one of us have come here to play only a part of it. So all parts of the separatedness, they become vital to form this dance of wholeness, masters, that the singular ego can't see. The singular ego only sees me, because I'm only expressing one part of my oneness, and that's all the ego sees. But if you can put together all parts of this singular, um, the singular consciousness, then you will see that it's nothing but the whole, and imbalance is impossible, masters. So all this separatedness that comes from the oneness have imprints that you might consider wounds or karmas or whatever it is. So the lives in which these drops incarnate, they play out the drama necessary to resolve this unresolved patterns of the whole, masters. So whatever is unresolved at the whole, that is being completed through all our individual, individual representations. So these individual singular drops from this ocean of oneness, they emerge and they take these ego forms, and then they go back to that oneness. But when you are in this singular identity, even then you can balance, masters. We've had such great masters like Buddha, Jesus. They had physical bodies, but they still played out the duality of being an individual, a separate identity with an ego, and at the same time, the awakened oneness. They did both this simultaneously, masters. Buddha, Jesus, and others, great masters, they've attempted to show us this way on countless worlds. It's just not on this earth world alone, masters. Countless worlds, this cycle just goes on. You know, the drops coming out of this ocean of oneness, coming out in the physical form, but they have the potential of complete awakened consciousness because they are the oneness. So every drop carries the potential for full awakening to that oneness consciousness. But the ego might say, you know, ego doesn't realize that you are already there. So it keeps saying, I want to be one of those awakened people. So it'll look at Christ and Jesus and say, I want to be that. Because it doesn't realize that within each one of us, we have complete potential. That is the paradox that we are in, masters. In many of the fourth density teachings that we have just been talking about, the process of awakening, hence, is not doing, master. There's nothing to do. It's actually a process of not doing. The ego, again, as I mentioned before, fears the state of not doing because it sees that its function will come to a close if it goes to that non-doing phase. When we talk about not doing, we do not mean just sitting on the couch and just drinking water or coffee or beer or something like that. We mean a state of allowance, just allowing, a state of openness that compels you to move with the flow of the universe in a way that is not directed by ego. Most of us who have had this awakening experience at times, we know that they come when you are in a state of allowance and not when you are chasing after these moments. You will never get those awakening experiences, masters. Those experiences only come when in your state of allowance. So moving with the flow is foundational essence, master, of awakening. So when this individual drops, the individuals that emerge out of this oneness, they express whatever is needed by the one, whatever physical experience they've come, and then they return back to the oneness. There is no hierarchy, masters, that particular individual is greater than this particular individual is no, there is no hierarchy. There is no story of self-importance that our ego tells us. Everything is completely balanced at all times, which is so hard for the ego to understand and accept when faced with things it does not like. It does not, but If ego can't understand things, it won't like. So it won't let you do that. This is our true nature, masters. Our existence as third density beings for so many thousands of years has blinded us with the eyes of separation, masters. It has blinded us. It is not what it looks like through the eyes of the ego. Again, this is a normal part of evolution. There's nothing abnormal in it. That's how it's meant to be in the third density. But for how long, masters? We have to move on. So it was right when you were in the third density, but time has come to move on, masters. This is all part of evolution. Now that we are moving into the fourth density and to the fifth density thereof, and we are beginning our awakening process, masters. We're all sensing the infinite nature of our being outside the realm of duality. So though we can feel this duality, masters, we all know that there is something outside this duality which connects us all. And when do we feel that? In that magic moment, masters, when we are feeling that, when we are just allowing things to just happen, not chasing after things. That is when we feel this, masters. We see the infinite nature of our being outside the realm of this duality. So it is not an intellectual process, masters. What do I mean by intellectual process? So all that I explained, this ascension, this awakening, this integration, it's not something that you take a paper and you start writing down, okay, I'm at point A. How do I go from point A to point B to point C? Make a forward plan, a project plan, stick it on a fridge and say, okay, what do I do now today? What do I do tomorrow? We do not have to tax our mind so much, masters. It's not that using of intellect and following step by step is hard. This is an experimental process, masters. In this experimental process, we just have to let go and accept things the way they are coming, because everything that is coming to you is absolutely divinely pre-planned, masters. So when you open to the flow of the energy, to the flow of the life goes exactly the way that it's meant to be. And what's the path that's meant to be, masters? That is the path of ascension. You smoothly keep on going through this path of evolution or ascension and reach the destination. You open yourself to the oneness, for it is all that is, masters. It is the one. It is you. There is really nowhere to go, masters, though we all keep talking about destination. The destination that we have always been looking for is here, is now, is in this eternal moment, masters. Because that oneness that we are craving for, we already have it within us. We just have to allow ourselves to connect to that, to feel that, to experience that. So, masters, with that, I will stop my topic of ascension, awakening, and integration. So as we move forward, I'm sure that some of you who have been wondering about these terms, by what we have discussed, your understanding has become a little bit more clearer. Thank you very much for giving me this great opportunity. I thank Pyramid Spiritual Society's Moment, Patri Sir, Mahila Dhyana Mahachakram 2, and the PMC channel for giving me this great opportunity today to connect with you, divine beings. Thank you very much, Masters.